just for people who asked me to. And I want to make a shout out to Papa Melech and the awesome Katzes for hosting us here every single week. They're busy over there. And a shout out to everyone who's coming. So today we're going to learn about Parshat Tazria. And we'll discuss some different cool ideas. There's a bunch of different ideas I wanted to just talk about today. So I'll start by summarizing the Parsha. So the Parsha begins, kind of continuing the theme of last week of discussing purity and impurity and karbanos that you bring and different types of tuma and tara. So it discusses, it begins with the pasuk, Isha ki Tazria. Isha ki Tazria, a woman when she gives seed, v'yalda zachar, she gives birth to a male. And she says she'll be tamei for 7 days, just like her nida, as if she was a nida, and then she goes to mikvah, she becomes pure. So it begins to discuss that, and it speaks about how a woman becomes pure after her birth. So if she gives birth to a boy, she's tamei for 7 days, then she goes to the mikvah, and then for 33 more days, so a total of 40 days, she's usher to go to touch taharos and karbanos and anything to do with the base of mikdash. And after her 40 days, after a boy is born, she gives 2 karbanos and ola and a chatas, and she goes back to the base of mikdash. And with a girl, she's tamei for 14 days after birth, which means tamei to her husband, which is very interesting. In the olden days, a woman would be only tamei for 7 or 14 days to her husband. She would go to the mikvah, and even if she continued bleeding, her blood was pure blood for marital purposes. But for another 66 days, she was asked her to go and touch anything tahar and go to the base of mikdash, and then she would bring a karban. So for a woman, it's double the time, and it's always discussed why, because one of the reasons Chassidus is given is that there's a loss of life. So why is she bringing a karban chatas? What did she do wrong? So when she had this tremendous potential life inside her, and when it left her, her body lost tuma and tara, has a lot to do with life and death. That's why there's a lot about not necessarily good or bad. Not nida. A woman who's nida is not bad. She's not impure. She's not unclean. But there was a potential for life, and then it left her. So because of that loss of life, that's why it's so similar to death. That's why when someone dies, they're tamei. So that's the Chassidic, the deeper idea of the loss of life. So when a woman gives birth to a woman, it's as if she lost a life inside of her, and she lost the life potential inside the woman. The girl. The woman doesn't give birth to a female. So there's a double loss of life, because a female baby already starts to produce eggs. And so there's like a baby menstruation that happens when a baby is born. That's from a baby girl. So she lost a double life, so that's why she waits double the amount of time, and double the amount of time to go than a male. So it's seeing it in a much more, seeing tuma and tara in a much more way of not clean and unclean, because that's such a bad or impure. It's much more about the potential for life being kedusha and loss of life. And even though it's a good thing that she gave birth, and you want the life, but now it's not inside of her. So she has to wait and go to the mikvah.
What determines a girl's genetics?
What?
A girl's genetics are determined by her grandmother's.
Interesting. Yeah, there's a lot about genetics and about, it's very interesting. The first pasuk discusses that a woman who tazria, a woman who gives seed, she happens to give birth to a boy. So Pshat, it says a woman who gives for seed, conceives, and then she gives birth to a boy, she's tamei for 7 days. But the Gemara on this says that a woman who gives seed first, gives birth to a boy, and gives birth to a zachar, and when the man gives seed first, they give birth to a female. And the Rebbe actually said that this is not just a spiritual idea; it's actually a physical idea. It's like scientific.
Wait, what is it when a male gives seed?
First, the product is a female child, and when a woman gives seed first, a male child's born.
And that's biological.
And that's biologically, yeah. The Rebbe said it's a physical, actual thing, and there's an interesting story that I never understood fully. The Alter Rebbe, who was one who wrote the Tanya, his daughter was Rebbetzin, who gave up her life for the Alter Rebbe, and her son was the Tzemach Tzedek, who became the third Chabad Rebbe, and he told the Tzemach Tzedek to describe his connection. He said, and he gave a parish on this pasuk. He says on the quote from the Gemara, he says that Ish Mezriya Eskil Ledes Nekeva, that's your mother, and Isha Mezriya Eskil Ledes Ben, that's you. And that's you. So kind of like there's a very direct connection between him and the Alter Rebbe. It was a very interesting story that I never.
It is intervention.
What?
It is intervention.
Right.
Eggs are taken and mixed with sperm.
Right.
Then you're not going to know in the same way.
I don't think we fully understand how it works.
You wouldn't know first.
Right. You wouldn't know what. Right. And I don't know. We don't know if we fully get this idea. It's very, very interesting. Hi, Edis. So, hi Rachel. Now I see who's on. Hi Rachel and hi Shoshana. Welcome. So, thanks, Sharon. So that's really just the first couple of psukim in the parsha. The rest of the parsha, most of the parsha discusses something nothing to do with Tazria. Even though the pasuk is called Tazria, which means give seed or conceives a child, and it speaks about the purification of the male and the female. And then after 8 days, it's a male. She gives him a bris, and which is a very deep idea. And then the rest of the pasuk discusses a mitzora, someone who has tzaras, and it discusses. I'll give you a brief overview of mitzora. That is, someone has a white or pink lesion on his, which it's mistranslated as leprosy. It's not really leprosy. It's a supernatural phenomenon that occurred on a person. You go to the Kohen. Only a Kohen could pronounce someone tamei from tzara'as. There's no one else, even if it was a child Kohen. There's no one else who could pronounce it. And we learn a beautiful lesson that when you come, sometimes we need to call someone out and pronounce someone impure or separate someone from the rest of the people. And when we do that, only a Kohen is able to do that. And what we learn from the idea of the Kohen? A Kohen is someone who benches the Jewish people, who has the power to bless and bench Jewish people. A Kohen is someone who's an Ish Chesed, comes from Aaron, who is an Ish Chesed. The only time we can criticize someone else or separate someone else from other people, give someone else, tell someone something bad about themselves or reveal an impurity in someone is if we come with complete love, if we're complete Ish Chesed like a Kohen. And we learn that only someone who's coming with 100% love. So you examine yourself first. If you're coming to criticize someone and there's any ounce of resentment or like, I want to do this, I feel good to do this. If it's not just I completely love this person, I want what's best for them, then we have to hold back and we can't. In Chassidus, they say you have to sharpen, you have to trim your nails before you. Chassid always has to have trimmed nails because you have to Chassidim always call each other out and tell each other how to be better and how to have a better avoda. But you can only come to someone if your nails are trimmed, if you don't have anything sharp, if you're coming out of complete love, and never to come out of anger or anything. So that's what we learned, that it has to be a Kohen. So back to the Parsha, he'd come with his legion, he would go to the Kohen, and the Kohen would decide if it was Sara'as, and if he wasn't sure, well, right away he would quarantine him for 7 days, and if it remained or if it spread, and if it looked deeper to the skin, and there was different signs, then he would pronounce him Tameh. And if it didn't spread at all, but it didn't shrink, then he would quarantine him for another 7 days, and he would check if the hairs turned white, then he pronounced him Tameh. So that's the job of that's what most of the Parsha deals with. Then there's so many other details of if there was already a rupture or a burn or some kind of thing on the skin, and how the Kohen decides if it's Tameh or Tahar. And then there's a whole other idea afterwards that what if a person's entire body was white, turned white, and looked like Sara'as? And there, in that case, in specific cases, if he had a lesion and then it spread, Sara'as, and it spread to his entire body, he's pure. He's completely pure, which is something also very Chassidic learns a lot from that. And finally, the Parsha speaks about how the Mitzorah purifies himself. He goes to the Kohen and they go to a mikvah and they have a special piece of cedar wood and a scarlet thread and a bundle of hyssop, and he's pure. And the next week's Parsha, Mitzorah, is interesting because Mitzorah is called Mitzorah, but over there it really doesn't speak about how one becomes Tameh through Tzara'as. It speaks about how Mitzorah purifies himself. So Tazria and Mitzorah are read a lot together, and it's a very interesting idea. We always speak about the name of something being really important to what's inside of it, and how the name of something tells us about the essence of it, and how our name is the essence because Neshama, the two middle names of the word Neshama are Shem. So the name of the Parsha, Tazria, I want to discuss that a lot today. What is Tazria? Why is the whole Parsha, which is about Tzara'as, called Tazria, which means to plant seeds and to conceive or give birth? And it's speaking about a woman giving birth, when really that's only a very small part of the Parsha. And the entire Parsha somehow has to be connected to this idea of Tazria. So we'll start with learning an interesting Orach Chaim about this pasuk, Isha ki Tazria. The Orach Chaim HaKadosh had this beautiful parush on, just read it nice. Find it. Oh, and even just to strengthen the question, a Mitzorah, we know, is considered someone who's Kashav Kames. There's different types of people, we discussed this one, who are alive but considered dead. A Rasha, or a poor person, or a blind person, and a Mitzorah. And we're speaking about the beginning of the Parsha, talking about Tazria, which is giving birth to life. And a Mitzorah, who someone is considered like he's dead. And why? Because he is separated from the camp, he's isolated from everybody, he's not allowed to be in contact with anybody, so it's as if he's not alive. His life is about experiencing with other people. And here we're talking about two complete opposites. We're speaking about a woman giving birth, and the Parsha being called that, and then we're speaking about a Mitzorah. And even more strength to strengthen that, it says, it's brought down, and I'll find the source in a moment, that Mashiach is if they asked who is Mashiach, if anyone knows the exact words, you can help me out. And they said Mashiach is the Mitzorah of Beis Rebbe. He's the Mitzorah. Mitzorah of Beis Rebbe, of the house of Rebbe. So how is Mashiach a Mitzorah? Mitzorah is the opposite of life or anything else. And this Parsha is about life and death. So what is it about a Mitzorah that's connected to life, obviously, and what is birth? So let's first discuss, we can discuss it together today. Let's first discuss what is birth. So the Or Chaim says, Isha Ki Tazria, Yalda Zahar, is really a reference that Isha is Knesset Yisrael, is our neshama, right? The neshama is always in female word, female term, and we always discuss how a woman, Isha refers to the Jewish people, and we're married to Hashem, and Hashem is the Matan Torah, Hashem was the husband, and we were the bride and the groom when we came to meet. So when it says Isha Ki Tazria, what does that mean? Isha is Knesset Yisrael, is the Jewish people. Tazria is the avoda of mitzvos ma'asiot, of practical physical mitzvot. And V'yalda Zachar. So what happens when Isha, when Bnei Israel, when Knesset Yisrael does mitzvot ma'asiot? V'yalda Zachar, she gives birth to the Geula. And we had a meeting Monday night, a get together at Yehuda's Lighter's house, and we spoke so much about how birth is connected to Geula, and all the parables about giving birth connected to the Geula. You gave a lot of different examples, and I really liked the one you said about how the birth pangs of the Chabad Mashiach. The Chabad are the birth pangs of Mashiach, and how now, right before labor, it's the most beautiful time, but it's the most painful time when the baby's coming out. And now we're in the threshold of Mashiach coming. We know that Mashiach's about to come, and it's the most painful time because we're bringing the baby out. But I like what you said. You heard this, that there's like no turning back. You don't just stop the pain or say, give me painkillers. And there's no turning back. The baby's coming, and Mashiach's coming. So we have to keep pushing through the pain and bring Mashiach. And all the pain that we're going through in the world now is the bringing of the Mashiach. So Mitzorah has a lot of connections to Mashiach. The Mashiach is a Mitzorah, and there's Haftarah as well. And the Haftarah, just to deviate for a moment, there's an interesting story.
When you say that in Mashiach and Mitzorah, it's helpful to explain that when we think of Mitzorah, even though leprosy, like you said, is long term, we think of it as a negative thing.
Right.
When it refers to Mashiach as Mitzorah, it's referring to the brightness of it. It has to be pure white.
Right.
So Mashiach is going to be so pure,
right,
and the Torah will then keep through that he will purify all of our impurities.
Right. Yeah, we had said that the Mitzorah is not what we think about someone impure who sinned, who's isolated from the camp, and we'll discuss it even more today, what a Mitzorah is and why it's not a negative thing. If we don't have Tzara'as nowadays, even though in those days Tzara'as was a sin in the Medrash says for any type of bad language. And we saw when Moshe spoke bad, he got Tzara'as. Moshe wasn't tzaddik and he had Tzara'as. Miriam spoke badly, and Moshe, and she got Tzara'as. So Tzara'as was something that happened to tzaddikim. And it's such a great phenomena, Tzara'as, that we don't even merit to have Tzara'as nowadays.
But a few hundred years ago, were there any stories about Tzara'as occurring?
I don't know. Tzara'as stopped when we became poor. So just to deviate, fine. We'll talk about Tzara'as now. I'll teach now. Yes, exactly. So I was going to just say that. So Tzara'as, when did we have Tzara'as? Tzara'as was on somebody who was perfect, who in the inside completely refined himself. He had nothing bad inside of him on the inside. On the inside, he worked on all his midot. He worked to become, like the Alter Rebbe would say, like a Beinani, or even not a tzaddik gamor, maybe some level of tzaddik, but he didn't do any sins on the outside. But there was a remnant of who he used to be. The bad one was only on the outside of him, but his inside was completely pure. There was no bad. And on the outside, he had a couple of things to work on, and that's why Tzara'as affected him only on the outside. First, it started on the house. That's in the Tzara'as came on the house to warn him, and even that was considered a positive thing, because why did Hashem make Tzara'as? There was one of the things that we learned about Mitzorah and why it's a good thing. Just going to cut the answer now. Is that it's like a beautiful twist on Tzara'as and Tazria that the Rebbe has, which is so like revolutionary. So all the punishments that Hashem gives us are not like when we punish someone because we're upset or we want to punish them. When Hashem punishes us, it's like a parent like cleaning his child because he doesn't want him to get an infection, or a doctor who's healing somebody because he doesn't want an infection and it hurts. It might be painful, the treatment, but it's only for your good. And we know that anything Hashem gives us that we perceive as negative is only for our good, to clean us and to heal us and to make us better. We don't always see that. In every affliction, and I'll try to say we have to thank Hashem for anything bad that happens, and say, thank you, Hashem, because you know what I need. And sometimes we see this, we know why Hashem gives us something negative, and we say, thank you, Hashem, you knew I needed that. And we go through something difficult, and we realize why we needed that, or we think something's not the greatest, and we say, oh, now I realize why it didn't work out, or why this happened to me. And he uses the mashal of a father scrubbing his child. He thinks his father's cruel because he's cleaning him, and really he just was dirty. He didn't want him to get sick or have an infection. So we don't always see bigger plan. But in Mitzorah, we do see. By Tzora'as is the one time that we see that it looks like a punishment, but we know that it's not a punishment. We know it's only for our good. And because of Mitzorah, we see the good that comes out of it. For example, in the home, the reason when Tzora'as afflicted someone's home, they would have to, in a certain cases, they had to break the walls of that home. The Tzora'as didn't clear up a certain amount of time. And in the walls were hidden treasures that, which nation? The Ammon? What? The Canaanites would hide their treasures in their house, and no one would find them. And when they fled, and the Jewish people came, they didn't know that there's treasures and gold and silver hidden in their walls of their houses. When they broke it, really was a blessing Hashem gave them. So that was an example of how Tzora'as was something that seemed negative, but we saw immediately how it was for our good. And even with the Tzora'as for a person, if a person had Tzora'as on his body, or if it was on his clothing, he had to burn the garment. If it was on his body, he had to be separated from everybody and be isolated and quarantined. And it was clearly for his good, because the person who had Tzora'as was someone who in some way abused his power of speech to negatively affect someone else. And not necessarily saying something terrible outright, but spoke about someone that caused him something negative to happen, and didn't value the power of his speech. And we'll speak about value of speech. But
I thought you said he had to be so pure.
exactly. So in the inside he was pure, but he was so pure, there was a teeny part of him, like Moshe Rabbeinu was so pure, but still there is teeny things that might not have been exactly perfect. So to fix those teeny things, like his power of speech, and Miriam, just for small things that were only on the outside. If the person was bad on everywhere and just sinned all the time, Tzora'as wouldn't help him, because it's just to fix a layer on the outside of his garment of speech, which is an external garment. It's not an internal garment.
Everyone back then gets their hands.
So everyone back then was in a higher level. It was a very high level. Yeah. Not everybody got Tzora'as. Anyone who got Tzora'as was considered to be in a very high level. But anyone who merited Tzora'as was on a very high level. Who was someone that they knew that they only had an external thing to fix, and not an internal thing to fix. And how was the punishment fixing it? Because by being alone and not being able to talk to people, he was able to refine his power of speech and to think about. And it says that in the Gemara, that he affected people with speech, and he separated people with his speech, and he caused discord amongst people. So now he gets separated from his people, not just as a punishment because you get it because you did it, so you get punished, but as a time to fix his power of speech. Being alone gives you so much time to reflect and think about what we say and the power of what we say. So we'll just talk now, I guess, about the power of speech. And even in Baruch Shamar, we say, Baruch Shamar v'haya ha'olam. That Hashem said, and the world, v'haya ha'olam, all he had to do was say, and the world was created. And we learned from Mitzorah that how great the severity of the sin was by all the warnings that need to be separated from everybody, how the power of speech is so great. It says that when someone speaks ill about someone, 3 people are affected. The person who said it, the person who listened, and the person who was spoken about. So they always ask, why the person who someone said that thing bad about him, why is he punished? And there's many different answers. But one of the answers is a story of the Baal Shem Tov. And the Baal Shem Tov had 2 Talmidim and Chassidim who were arguing, had a bitter argument about something. And one of them got so heated up in the moment that he screamed to his friend, I could rip you up like a fish with my bare hands. Just out of anger in the moment. And the Baal Shem Tov heard this, and he called all the Chassidim to come sit in a circle, and he put his arms around the 2 people near him, and he asked all the Chassidim to hold hands, and he closed his eyes, and immediately they were transported. He lifted them up with him to the higher world to see what was happening, and they all of a sudden started to scream. The Chassidim started screaming, and what were they screaming? They literally saw a vision of this man who said those words, ripping his friends up like a fish. And the Baal Shem Tov's lesson was that our words, even when the person who's spoken about is affected, because our words, even if they're not true or are true, anything we say has a physical, tangible effect in this world. That when we say something, it causes it to be physically manifest. And we learn this how even the word, I love this parish of the word Zavar and Dibor are the same exact shoresh. Elu ha-dvarim. Dvarim means items, and it also means dvarim, to speak. Our speech is so tangible. Our speech is what creates our reality, and speech is what separates human beings from all other creations. We have this power to speak to another person, to connect with another person, to write, to convey ourselves through speech. And it's the most, and I was going to repeat the story that Yehuda said 2 nights ago about I have the text. It's a story from the Gemara about this. Just read it in the text. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel told his slave Tabi to go to the market and buy me the best piece of meat. So he went and he brought him back a tongue. And then he gave him money, and he said, take this money and go buy me the worst piece of meat. And he came back and brought him a tongue. And he said, I don't understand. When I asked you to bring me the best piece of meat, you brought me a tongue. Why again did you buy me a tongue? And his servant Tabi replied, because from the tongue comes good, and from it also comes evil. When it is good, there is nothing better than it. But when it is bad, there is nothing more evil than that. That's from the Medrash Vayikra Rabbah. So there's this power of speech that we have is so powerful that we can cause worlds to be created from it. We can create, and the Hashem made the entire world just through speaking. And we are Adam ala Elyon, we resemble Hashem, and we have this power that when we speak words, we can create an entire reality. When we know this, when we speak to children or even adults who are so impressionable, when we tell them there's stories of till today where people say that someone told me you can't do anything right. How that affects the child, it creates the reality for them. But when we say to someone, you are such an artist, when we say to a child, you are actually creating qualities in it, because this speech we have creates a quality in someone else. And creates this reality. Because when you say something, it's a tangible thing, like a davar. It's a real thing that creates a real reality. And we have to always think about the Asara Marot Shenivra Ha'olam, and how everything we say has the power to create. We have to be so careful what we say. And there's it's interesting that there's the Pasuk of Shlomo Melech of Daiga B'Leiv Enosh Yasichenu. And there's 2 pirushim on Yasichenu. Means when you're worried about something, Yasichenu. The first thing, I think this is the Parshah Rabbi, Yasichenu means to push away, or it can mean discuss with a friend. So he says, when you have a worry in your heart, when you're really worried about something, the first thing you should do is push it away. You don't want to verbalize it, because if you're worried about something and you verbalize it, you have the power of making it more real. So don't even verbalize it. You're worried about something, push it away. Yasichenu, with 2 hands, push it away. If it persists and you can't push it away, then Yasichenu, speak it over with a friend. Why? And this is something that the Rebbe said this about dreaming. When you have a bad dream and you're worried about it, the first thing you should push it away. Don't talk about it. But when you say it, it creates it in a more real way, because speaking is creating a real thing. If it keeps persisting and you can't push the thought away and it's really bothering you, then Yasichenu, speak about it with a friend. Discuss it with someone. Why? And tell that friend the friend should interpret it positively, because the way he interprets it is how it's going to be. And this is also said about Yosef the Tzaddik. When Yosef was interpreting the dreams of the 2 officers of Paro in jail, it says Ish Kisrono Pasar, and the commentaries say that the way he interpreted, that's how it became. Not necessarily because he knew how it would happen, but because the way he interpreted it created the way that it happened. So your interpretation, when you have something that's worrying you, and whenever if I have a bad dream, I tell someone, interpret this for the good. Because the way that a Jew interprets it and says it's going to be, that creates. So you should go to 3 Jewish friends, close friends, and have them interpret your bad dream or your worry in a positive way, because that's creating a positive reality. And we learn so much about how careful to be with how we speak, from the punishment of a teeny deviation of someone from speech, how greatly affects themselves, even the person who had to listen to it, and even the person who was spoken about. It has a tangible effect on their life, even though they had nothing to do with it. So, yeah.
But when we talk to God, we have conversations with God, we put it all out there.
Right.
How does that work with that? Because you're not supposed to say it, you're not supposed to put it out there, but when we're talking to God, I put everything out there.
Right. We're supposed to, especially with Hashem, we're not supposed to be scared to say something. But there's certain things that you don't want to put out there. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe was a perfect example of certain things that you don't say. There's something that I just heard that the Lubavitcher Rebbe never said the word deadline, no matter how urgent something was. He didn't say the word deadline because it had the word dead in it. He would say a due date. A due date is about life, and a deadline is about the opposite of life. So there's certain words you want to just be careful. And in my house growing up, we weren't allowed to say like anything had to do with like death or dying or start. Like, I don't know. There's certain things that we were like, we don't say that. We don't say things like what's the word? What do people always say? I'm dying for it, or I'm dying to eat something. There were certain things you just be so careful to say, and there's a bunch of things that the Lubavitch Rebbe was so careful about the way he spoke.
Even to God.
With Hashem, you pour your heart out. It's you and Hashem, and then nothing else could affect you. You know, it's you and Hashem, and you could pour your heart out. You can say whatever is on your mind. You don't have to filter. When we're talking about a person or about ourselves, and there's another story about someone who came to the Frierdiker Rebbe, the previous Lubavitch Rebbe, and spoke about what a horrible person he was. And the Frierdiker Rebbe said that I never saying lashon hara. Let me just get the words. He said, you know how grave the sin of lashon hara, speaking easily to a human being, is. Nowhere to my knowledge does it say that it's permissible to speak lashon hara about oneself. But you can't speak lashon hara about yourself either. And lashon hara is something that can create a reality. But there are a lot of examples of how careful the Rebbe was with his speech. Yeah.
What?
When you're talking to God, it's tefillah. Tefillah is a mitzvah. It's a whole different category.
So
I would hope so.
yeah, when you're talking,
Because I will be able to say what I want to say.
When you're
To
talking
God.
something,
In my private,
for sure.
go to do room.
One of the things that the Lubavitch Rebbe was careful about was he didn't want to call a hospital a Beit Cholim. He said, why are we calling a hospital a Beit Cholim? He said it was very against it, and he pushed for people to call it a Beit Refuah, a place of healing, not a place of, right, a cemetery was a Beis HaChaim, a place of life, not a place of death. There were many things, and there was many stories specifically about special needs people and groups who came to the Rebbe, and there was even a woman who came to the Rebbe. She was crying that she had a child born with Down syndrome, and the Rebbe said, I don't think it's right to use the word Downs about a baby, because Down implies that it's negative. And then he said, I don't think that we should be using that. Yeah. So that was something this recent story that someone shared about the Rebbe. And
changing in society for special needs children when we were younger, it was called the media. We didn't use that today.
Right.
Changing life.
So this is years ago, before anyone came. Nowadays, people are so careful about saying special needs. In those 40 years ago, they asked the Rebbe to put out a statement about the mentally retarded people, and the Rebbe right away said, I negate completely the idea of calling them that, and they should be called people with special abilities, because and he met with a group of injured veterans from Eretz Yisrael. This is a famous story, and they all share their accounting. The Rebbe came by each of them and spoke to them and thanked them for their country, for their service. And the Rebbe told them that I don't think you should be called Nechei Yisrael, because Nechei means a lacking, and if you're lacking a limb or of any sort, this is the story told by, I forget which, this veteran, but he was in the war, and he lost two, and his tank blew up, and his two closest friends, he watched them die before his eyes, and his legs were completely crushed, and they had to amputate both his legs. And he was very, very bitter for many years. And he says that when he came to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe looked at him in his eyes and said, thank you, he knew what he needed to hear, and he felt like he was completely healed. One of the things the Rebbe said is that we shouldn't be calling you Nechei Yisrael, we should be calling you Mitzuyane Yisrael, the Mitsuyan, the extra special, because, not just as a nice way to speak about it, because if something was taken away from you, or you are lacking in some part, Hashem must have something else that's making up for it even more, right? Like a blind person, the Rebbe calls Sagina Hor, extra light, because he must have an extra light somewhere else, so he'd be able to see even better, because he doesn't need his eyesight, because he's making up for it with light somewhere else. Yes. And it's very special. The Rebbe was so careful not to say bad or impure. He went out of his way to say not good or not alive or not pure. And in Gemara Pesachim, it says that Hashem added 8 letters in the Torah so as not to say something negative about an animal. It says Hema Asher Einena Tahora, and it added, instead of saying Hema Tmeya, it said Asher Einena Tahora, about an animal that is not pure and goes out of his way. And the Rebbe always taught about this. If the Torah added 8 letters, which the Torah doesn't add anything, just to speak purely about an animal, how much more so we have to think and chew over everything to make sure not to say something negative about a person. If we do have to, we have to come as a Kohen and with complete love and share our love for the person and share how we want to help the person become better. And it has to be out of complete and total love.
So if someone died, you could just say, he's not alive.
Yeah.
You would say, he's dead.
Yeah.
He's not alive.
Yeah, we're trying to teach my 4-year-old to stop saying dead about everything. He says dead all day, and it really makes me taken aback, because I grew up, we weren't allowed to say, we were so careful not to say you if you ever did anything. We would never speak about another person and say to you if this ever happened to you something bad, because you don't want to bring that about. So I told my son, I told you guys this week, on Chafei Adar was the Rebbetzin Chaim Mishka's birthday, and I told him that she turned 119, and he said, "Oh wow, she's gonna die soon." So I was like, taking 118. Yeah, I was telling him that we take the Pitzel Kufya test now for 118. He's like, "Wow, that's very old. She's gonna die." So
he'd say die, enough. I need to speak as well.
what?
He'd say die, enough.
Yeah, die. Nachon, must speak. It's true.
Yeah, my grandson.
It's very scary.
My grandmother said, die.
My daughter said that the first year we lived in Boston. Why do they want to
Die. Yeah, we should make a campaign against that. So let's go back a little bit to the first pasuk of Isha Ki Tazria, the Yalda Zachor. Do we finish the? Yeah. Oh, so back to the idea of Tazria. So a woman who's Bnei Israel, who Tazria, who plants, and it's referring to planting mitzvot. So just an idea that the Rebbe speaks about the Orach Chaim's parish, a woman who plants the Yalda Zachar, and she brings Mashiach, which is Zachar is the attribute in the world of consistency, of stability. Tokef. Tokef means good until, of consistency. And Nekeva is the fact we all are made up of Zachar and Nekeva, and the energy of Nekeva is something that wanes. Just like the women are compared to the moon, who waxes and wanes and changes, and it's not consistent and everlasting and eternal. It changes. Women, we know we change, and we go up and down, and in the best ways possible. In the best ways. And men are more linear, and they're direct, and they're straight, and they continue consistently. But the Mashiach Lasig Lavo, it says if we plant, if Aisha Ki Tazria, when we plant mitzvot in this world, like the Orach Chaim says, Yalda Zachar, she'll give birth to a Zachar. The Mashiach that will come will be Zachar, which will be, we want it to be like the attribute of Zachar, which is consistent. And we actually learned that the feminine energy, when Mashiach comes, will be consistent. The moon will stop to wax and wane. The moon will shine all the time. Well, the energy, like the sun, and even greater. So when the times of Mashiach, we're hoping that we know that this times of this Gula, the final Gula, will be final. It will be Zachar. It'll be linear and straight and not changing and unwavering. And the guy likes something, he likes it. We change our minds, and we have different. We go through phases and styles of what we like and we don't like. But it's more consistent in a male. And even not to say that women are not consistent and men are not inconsistent, but those are the energies of Zachar and Nekeva. So that's the Parshah of the Orach Chaim. And the Alter Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe says about Ki Tazria. What does Ki Tazria teach us? That woman, why is it using this interesting word of Tazria, which is similar to planting, about conceiving a child, or the mitzvah, about planting the mitzvah? Because it's so tempting to just sit and learn in class and like connect to Hashem spiritually and learn about tzedakah, be inspired about what it means. But the Lubavitcher Rebbe says that the dollar is still in his pocket. He has to take the dollar out of his pocket and put it in the pushka. That's what Ki Tazria means. That we have to plant. We don't plant. If you plant a seed in the air, if you plant a seed above ground, if you plant a seed anywhere and apply up in there, it's not going to produce anything. Where does planting has to happen? In the ground. So what do we learn about planting? The planting has to be done. Planting a mitzvah can't be done by learning about it or being inspired about it and remain there. Planting has to be under the ground. Has to be grounded in the physical act. There's nothing more physical and tangible than ground. It has to be planted under the ground, and then only then could it produce the offspring. So our mitzvah now to bring Mashiach has to be physical, tangible mitzvah where we plant and we work hard and we toil, and that produces the results that produces the growth of the tree. And if it's planted above the ground in spirituality and just learning and being or connecting, people want to say like through my heart I connect to Hashem. I love Hashem in my heart. But if it remains in our heart, then it won't produce the results afterwards. So that's one of the things we learned about planting. There's so many other ideas if anyone wants to share about planting, about how a seed includes within it the entire tree, and small, and also and all of our actions as well. And we discussed so much this on Tu B'Shvat about how much of and how the seed needs to decompose before, and that's very much connected to a mitzvah. That in order for a seed, the germination process, in order for a seed to grow into a tree, the first thing is the seed decomposes into the ground. And a mitzvah is that idea. It's why. So now let's go back to the idea of the name of the Parsha of Tazria, which discusses the mitzvah. Because like we said, a mitzvah is not a punishment that's negative. It's a rebirth for the person. It's a birthing. It's giving this person an opportunity to now change himself and become better and heal himself and purify himself. And that works, even though it might seem like a backstep, like he's being removed from people. He has a lesion on his body. Really, it's only the germination process of the seed. It's only the temporary decomposing of something that seems like it's negative, like you're decomposing, it's falling apart. But yeah, it's only to produce great, tremendous tree. So when we feel a setback in our lives or a time, those are the times that push us to go forward. When we feel a time in our life where we're not doing as well as we used to be, or we feel bad about ourselves, those are the best times. When we're feeling bad that when I'm feeling bad that I'm not spiritually high, when I'm feeling spiritually lacking, that's the best in the moment. It's the decomposing, but that's going to push me to do way more than I was doing today and yesterday, and spiritually for myself. It's going to push me to daven. It's going to push me to learn a little bit. It's going to push me to go out and do more mitzvah, to learn with my children. It's going to push me to do more. So that temporary step back, like a mitzvah, is only the healing process, the beginning of the birthing process. And that's why the Parsha that discusses the mitzvah is called Tazria, and it's really about birthing, because it really is a process of birthing. And that's the same way, even the Rebbe says, even though we discuss it about mitzvah, it's the same way for all types of punishments that Hashem gives us. It's really for us to take it and become better, and to recognize in those moments where we feel down and we feel like we took a few steps back in any area of our lives, to realize that it's only a push, and it's only going to help us become this tremendous tree and this tremendous and plant and go spread our branches outwards.
Do we have any control over whether the man or the woman gives over the seed first?
What?
Do we have any control over who gives the seed?
Ask her.
I don't know. It's a great question. Yeah, we have Rachel here. Bryna wants to know if we can control who sees first.
Is there any control that we have over men giving the seed?
There's different medicines that just,
No, it's when you ovulate.
yeah, it has to do with ovulation and
It has to do with, when you go to the mikveh, if you're ovulated before or if you're ovulating after.
Rashi says that. So
Yeah.
what about special diets?
yeah, there are people always try to come
And that's because the male sperm swim faster. So if there's an egg already there, it's going to be a boy. But the female sperm, if the ovulation is later, then it'll be a girl.
That's how I had shaken.
So let's
Special herb that you're talking about. There was an incident recently in Israel where somebody wrote on Facebook about a pizza company, how it's a stupid girl comment like, oh, they went nice to something like that. And the whole thing escalated, who cares? And the whole company went out of business. It was a pizza shop because somebody wrote something just stupidly, a youngster, about them that, something went viral. Do you remember that? It was on the TV thing about what should do. It became a legal thing as well. And it was Lashon Hara. It was Lashon Hara and the stupid because this young family lost their business because of one comment that went viral on the internet. So we're just talking about speaking. We're talking about an audibility on the internet and all that. It becomes a very complicated issue. Lashon Hara is not just verbal, it's
right. Yeah, so Sharon is saying that it actually causes, saying something bad about something actually cause negative effects, even if it wasn't true at all. So our speech could create complete realities. Let's just end off with a thought about why Mitzvah is Mashiach. There's many interpretations of why Mashiach could be a Mitzvah, or it says Mashiach is a Mitzvah. And one of the explanations is that, just like we said, that a Mitzvah is someone who on the inside is pure, and on the outside he has a little bit to fix. Also now, in a Galut, it looks like we are so low, and it looks like we're just completely evil now. And it looks like everything is just completely bad and so low. But really, like we kept saying, are we in Galut to elevate all the sparks? And really, we learned that all the sparks in this world are elevated. And this world is refined and ready for Mashiach. Only on the outside. Just like a mitzvah looks like he's completely bad, but it's really just on the outside. And the inside, he's good. Right now in Galut, it's only the outside that needs a little bit of polishing. Like the previous service said, we just have to polish our buttons. We're all ready. We just have to tweak a little bit on the outside. So by having a Mashiach b'mitzvah, it's teaching us that we're really just a little bit on the outside has to be cleansed. And even that, what Rabbi said was finished, and we're ready for Mashiach to come. So let us daven and merit that Mashiach will come right now, and we won't have to need all these reminders and external, and we'll merit to be on that level of a mitzvah, and it should flip over like in the blink of an eye. Like in the Torah tells us about the story of the mitzvah outside the camp. They sieged whatever. Should I say the story? In the Haftorah, there's a story about which war was it? One of the Malchios sieged the Jewish people, and the king was very upset at the Navi for not davening. And the Navi told the king that don't worry to daven to Hashem because he could save them from the siege. The Jewish people were starving. He said that soon Seah of barley is going to be 1 shekel, but you're not going to merit to enjoy it. And it's a story about the Mitzora'im, and that, in long story short, the general of the army that was sieging them, his daughter was sick. The Navi saved her, and he tried to pay him money, and he wouldn't take the money. But his student, Gehazi, Gehazi ran after him. Gehazi or Gehazi? Gehazi ran after him and took the money. And because of this, he got Sara'as. So they had to leave the camp. Gehazi and his 3 sons had to leave the camp. And they had Sara'as. And over there, when they left the camp, they saw that the army had ran away. And they were completely safe from the siege. And the Nabi's words in the Qiyam. And we learned from this that Mashiach as well will come in the blink of an eye. It won't, even though it seemed in that time, the king laughed at him and said, there's no way that tomorrow, that now they're starving and dying from hunger, that tomorrow you're saying that a bushel of barley is going to sell for 1 shekel. And there's no way. And even though now it looks like there is no way, we can't even imagine to ourselves that the way the world looks now, what's happening in the countries around us, that tomorrow it's going to be completely the opposite. We can't imagine it. But Mitzorah, that we learn from this, that in the blink of an eye, everything can turn around completely. So yeah, we merit that that everything should turn around in our personal lives and for the Jewish people in a blink of an eye without even knowing how the Mashiach should come and everything should turn around.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Do you think that before